Round of applause. There was a moment there where I really thought Trevor was going to break out into Ain't No Mountain High Enough, because he talked about no wind, no rain. If anyone knows the song, those are part of the lyrics. So I was getting excited because I thought we were going to hear a song from the US ambassador to Vienna, to Austria. But we're moving swiftly on, and we're still talking about investment. For those of us who've just come in the room, please do grab a seat. There are loads on this far side of the room, so please do come round. We're carrying on our talks about global trends in deep tech investment this time, and we have another great panel lined up for you. This time we're moderated by Gemma Mill, and she's joined by Benjamin Joff, Christoph Yerkzak, and Sophia Chmik. For those of us who've just joined the room, we are using Slido if you want to ask questions, so please get Slido out. The hashtag is just Pioneers19. So if we're ready to go for our next panel, let's give them a huge round of applause as they take the stage.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Thanks, guys, so much for joining us on this deep tech investment panel. I'm joined by three awesome investors who've got three sort of slightly different angles to come at this topic, so hopefully we'll have quite a flavourful discussion around this topic. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they'll do a better job of it than I will. But before we begin, I'm Gemma. I'm a journalist. I'm based in London. I write for places like Forbes, BBC, Guardian, and I predominantly cover deep tech startups in Europe. So this is a pretty apt panel for me to be in, pretty bang on the money. Before we begin, why don't you guys give us a little bit of an introduction and a little bit of a bit of a summary of some of the types of companies that you're interested in and maybe some of the case studies that you've had before we get into the questions. Sophia, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Sophia, and I started a firm called Future Positive Capital. So it's a pan-European new VC that focused on what we call advanced technology, so deep tech, that will be applied to the global challenges. So that goes from air pollution to nutrition, to how you sort of manage the elderly population, etc. So we did few investment already, and maybe two to mention, as you remember, like one on the kind of more capital intensive side of things is a company called Winesect, based in France, which is today the category leader in insect farming. And the deep tech, which is maybe not obvious in that one, is twofold. The first one is R&D. So they will spend like 3 years analyzing dozens of insects and know what is the right composition, etc., what is the right feed, and then all the robotics of the facility. So it's actually very advanced. They have around 20 plus patents to do that. Another one, which is way more sort of asset light, is a company in health, which is called BioBeats, which is sort of a spin-out from OSI, Oxford Science Innovation. And this one is they built the first computational model that takes physical, physiological, computational, and psychological data to push personalized recommendation against stress. So that kind of bit the spectrum of the things that we do. And we're based in London and Paris.
Thank you, Sophia. Christoph.
Hi, I'm Christoph. So I'm running a fund. I'm a general partner at a fund called Quantonation. It's the first fund dedicated to quantum technologies. So it's very deep tech. So we're focusing on quantum computing and any kind of innovation out of physics labs. It's not purely quantum, and I'll give an example a little bit later. So we started investing last year. We're based in Paris as well. We made 4 investments, one coming next month. So far, we're the first round to make these investments, and we are also looking for funds at the moment for growth, for making a second round, follow-on investments in our companies. So we invest pre-seed, seed at this level, and we'll go on with Series A. So an example, or 2 examples maybe, just to give you an idea. One example is a company we've invested in, which is called Lighton. It's a spin-off from a university in France, and they're building accelerators for machine learning. It's not strictly speaking quantum, but it's based on lasers, optics, and what it does is reduces dimensionality of data in order to speed up calculations then with a GPU. It's a preprocessor. Second example in the field of softwares, because deep tech is not only about hardware, there's also software, which is pretty important, especially in our field where we are looking at reinventing the full stack. It's a company in Waterloo, in Canada. It's a spin-off also. So we're developing softwares for making qubits better. So qubits are what's at the heart of a quantum computer. So we're developing control softwares to make them a little bit better. I'm sorry if I make gestures, because with qubits you always have 0, 1, and you tend to try to make the demonstration. I will not do it today.
Thank you, Christophe. Ben?
Hi, my name is Benjamin Joff. I'm a partner at Hax. Hax is part of a global fund called SOSV, which is a very early stage fund at pre-seed level that invests in hardware through Hax and in biotech through branches called IndieBio and Rebel Bio. We have about 800 companies in portfolio. We do about 40 hardware deals a year. And our specialty is to invest at the pre-seed level and to help through specialized accelerators we set up in Shenzhen, in China, to help electronics development, and with labs in London and San Francisco to help biotech companies. To give a couple of examples from each branch, one is a company from Sweden called Flow Neuroscience that does a device that stimulates your brain to treat the symptoms of depression. And another one that you might have heard of from our biotech branch is a company called Memphis Meats that makes basically meat in a lab without the animals. So we're one of the leaders, probably the leader, by the number of deals in that sector of clean food. So, yeah.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so I think one of the debates, maybe we're having it backstage, but I think I certainly have this discussion, particularly with other journalists in the field, is what actually is the definition of deep tech. It seems to be this sort of, either people know it and have a rough idea of what it means, or they're like, what on earth are you talking about? So why don't we, I'll do mine last, and I'm going to let you guys go first. So let's start with you.
So first, there's many ways of defining, obviously. Like we, for example, call it advanced technology, more than deep tech. Some people call it exponential technology. So there's many kind of different ways. First is really, if I have to kind of give the easy definition, it's like everything which is not just sort of mobile and web. We don't do marketplaces, apps, where it's just an application of what already exists. First, the company needs to develop something, so it's kind of from science to engineering to development, that is new, that is better, with a radical innovation in their own technology. So the improvement is on like 10% or 20%. You can count it as like on X, like 10X, 2X, 100X, etc. So most of the time, these are spin-off of universities led by kind of academy scientists who worked on that technology for 10 years, 15 years. They spin out and they found an application, they build a product, they commercialize it. And most of the time, this is protected as well. So again, it's kind of really creating a new technology and finding kind of that application today. That's kind of what we kind of enter in our scope of investment, I would say.
Christophe, you talk about deep physics as well, so I'm intrigued by what you think deep tech is.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And just to give go on with that, I think all of the companies we've invested in are co-founded by scientists, physicists, either in a CTO role or even a CEO role, sorry. Sometimes they're spin-offs from universities. And for us, what matters really is the science behind. It's really looking at whether the science is good, sound. Sometimes it's not, actually. So it's really about the expertise, being able to assess very difficult, quote-unquote, technology that's at the heart of the product they will ultimately develop. Because we're investing very early stage, not necessarily a product there at this stage, more prototypes sometimes not even. So it's really for science and the people, this kind of attitude or approach to the field that they have that define deep tech for us.
Anything to add, Benjamin?
Yeah, I'll try a very awkward definition. I'll say it's a little bit like pornography. If you show it to me, I can tell you if it is pornography or not. Yes. There's many names for it. There's deep tech, frontier tech, future tech, advanced tech. There's all those names. I think deep tech's the one that kind of sticks because maybe better marketing term. We as well started to use it because we realized that part of our portfolio was increasingly that cross-section of engineering, science, and software. And like about 3 years ago, we started to invest a lot in medtech, in devices that don't just necessarily track, but can also treat. So digital therapeutics. We also started to invest a lot in robotics about 4 years ago, and we have now probably about a dozen service robots in our portfolio doing all sorts of things, particularly the inspection, maintenance, cleaning of the physical world around. So I'd say, yeah, I mean, more or less, it's kind of the same ideas, that it's an intersection of skills and that goes beyond like a simple app or website.
Yeah, whenever I'm trying to explain to people, I normally just say there's loads of IP involved and there's normally a scientist. This is probably normally how I can describe it, but there's always exceptions to the rules. But let's talk a little bit about, because it is a bit of a newer term, and this panel's on, global trends in deep tech, which is very broad. But I'm kind of curious as to, why are we here in 2019 at a tech conference having a discussion about global trends in deep tech investment? What's different now than, say, 5 years ago? Ben, you've got that mic, so I'll start with you.
I think what's different is that in our sector, particularly in hardware, a number of investors have made deals over the past 5 years, and a number of them have had problems with those deals because the teams building on the technology didn't really know how to do the rest. So the technology is big part of a company, but if you're building something physical, you need to understand things like supply chain, financing, logistics, distribution, all those things. And many teams were not prepared. And the investors also didn't have the skills to support them to learn those new skills. So there's been a wave that kind of went a little bit down around hardware, all the excitement of the early Fitbit on GoPro. But now, when you relabel it as deep tech, people focus more on the problems those things are trying to solve rather than the medium being used. So when we talk about medtech, we talk about the condition. When I mentioned Flow Neuroscience earlier, it's a company that is not a wearable competing with Fitbit. It's a technology company competing with pharma. It's competing with antidepressants. So that's, I think, what reactivate the interest, because when you talk about things like wearables and robotics, they're not really what's the problem they're solving? There's no clarity on that. One of a company in our portfolio is a company, you could say, making a giant Roomba. It's a robot that can clean commercial spaces, and they now have about 100 people, raised a Series B, doing very well, a company called AvidBots from Canada. And it's a very advanced robot. But when you put it in the middle of people, nobody pays attention to it because it's not trying to attract attention. But it's solving a real problem. And what it's competing with is not with other random robotics companies like Boston Dynamics or others. They're just competing. They're trying to become a cleaning company. So I think investors today that's waking up to the problems those companies can solve. And in the case of hardware, this has been enabled by the lower cost of cloud computing, better connectivity, opening up of the supply chain, particularly in Shenzhen and the broader Guangdong area. So those are the enablers why it's happening more today.
And Christoph, from your perspective, you guys are obviously a newer fund that is very, very specific in terms of what you're focusing on. But what we're also seeing is, I don't want to say traditional investors that normally do digital, but the kind of investors, Atomico is a good example in London, starting to move into places like biotech and more deeper advanced manufacturing. Where do you think if you were to sort of say what the role is of these two different kind of investors when it comes to deep tech, how does that work?
So I'll take maybe a couple of examples as well. So for the deals we've closed, most of the time we are kind of technological lead on the deals with other investors, which are more interested in digital, for example. We've had a strong focus on deep tech coming for the deal, eventually having larger tickets than we have. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So there's clearly a number of funds that that have the fear of missing out attitude for these technologies. They want to be there. They want to have a couple of investments in these fields because technology is there. But it's very hard to understand. It's very hard to make a choice in which company to invest. So they tend to trust us because we make the due diligences. We have a strong network of scientists to assess the technologies. So that's what I've seen. Also, the situation is very different, obviously, in Europe and in the US or Canada. It's much harder, I would say, to find really pure deep tech investors in Europe than it is in the US, obviously, West Coast, but also Canada. We have a strong portfolio of companies we're investing in, and a good deal flow in Canada, so we know the ecosystem fairly well. But it's been so far relatively hard to find deep tech investors for quantum technologies, but there's a couple of very large deals coming over the next months, like 10 million seed deals for hardware on quantum computing, which is really, really new. Something you would not have seen in Europe even, 1 year ago.
Yeah.
So things are changing for sure.
Amazing. And Sophia, from your perspective, we were talking backstage a little bit about the fact that you guys are focusing on areas that sometimes is a blind spot for other kind of investors. How do you guys think about why you're focusing on particular areas? Is it a sort of, you guys are focusing on a lot of areas that some people would sort of call impact areas, for instance, versus, say, looking at opportunity-based. How do you kind of wrestle with that?
We are sort of opportunity-based, just that we don't do what others tend to do a lot. So, which come back to your question about why now. So we're only interested in like the really big problems. So those are complex, they're large, they're global, and they require radical innovation. So the reason why we do deep tech is because, to your point, I really like Bernard, like we're like problem driven. So those problems need those solutions, so we go for those solutions. So and indeed, because of our ethos, we only want to do things that matter in our view and are really important. So but I really like your question about why now, because it's a question that literally we asked like every day, especially as a venture capitalist. And I think there are many reasons, and maybe 3 that is worth sharing with you guys today. One is that the sort of web and mobile platforms / industries have matured. So where there's too much, not too much, but way more money in those than there is great opportunities. So the competition is very strong, and the capacity and the possibility to make great return, like it was 10 years ago, is not there anymore. This is more difficult. So investors have to find other ways to find those very high return opportunities. And the deep tech used to be, and that's what you were saying, Benjamin, where it used to take a very long time frame to do this, a lot of research and a lot of development. And now, because of the convergence and the acceleration of technology, it started to be compatible with our own time frame, which is sort of 5 + 5. So we're not going to do research, it's not our role, but we're going to do companies that did research, develop, build a product, find a use case, and then we come in. And then it's definitely compatible with our time frame, and that is new. Just with the development of technology, that is what it is. And the third is exactly what you said about capital. And I'm just going to do a big up about Europe, because Europe has an incredible potential. It's the most prolific academic and scientist community in the world, with 2 million academic roughly, more than China and the US. But there is not enough capital to it. So the UK is leading the way with like OSI, with 800 million, Cambridge, Manchester. France is picking up a bit the trend, Germany. But honestly, it's an Eldorado still. Most of those great companies can't find the funding. So and that's the interesting part for you, is that, but others are picking up those companies, China or US. So the capital is flowing progressively to Europe. Now it's like 17% that is in deep tech in Europe, but it's growing, driven by interest of other markets. So now those companies have the funding, maybe not us, because some of the investors are not daring enough, but then they're like, okay, fine, I'll go somewhere else. And that is new as well.
Let's talk a bit about China then, actually. So you were talking about the fact that they're showing interest in terms of what's happening in Europe, but we're also seeing, an increase in the quality of science coming out of China as well, right? So
absolutely.
How do you kind of think about the opportunity with China? Is it just a kind of finding the right investors and bringing them over into other areas, or is it also, are you guys looking at China in terms of investment as well?
Yeah. So it's something we discovered like really the last, I would say, 4 years. So initially we're like more like driven by US and where things are faster, etc. So we invest in a company, also a lab-grown meat called Meatable. Here they raise like 5 million. In the US, the competitors raise 200. So we still have that kind of massive gap. But what we found is like China is investing 9 times more in Europe than in the US at the moment. Very quietly, but surely they do. When they come to Europe and they look at the portfolio of the very large investment firm, they don't look at the digital companies, because they can apply that to their market. They look at, okay, can this company crack a problem that I have in my country, where my market is way more interesting for me? And so they're looking for applications of a technology more than a revenue or the number of users. That's a completely different way to think when an entrepreneur or a VC look at the deal. So, and if you look at, and I think it's working, when you look at the percentage of unicorn coming from China used to be like 14% in 2014, now is like 35%. And US went from 60% to 40%. So you start to have that kind of big winners, that are backed by China or from China. So we actually indeed building a bridge quite actively with that geography, because we think that it's more interesting for companies to have that bridge as well as the US one, which is usually well covered by the industry.
And Benjamin, from your perspective, obviously you're both, massive focus on hardware. You've been based in China for a long time and over in that space. How do you kind of think about these changes in the global status?
Yeah, no, I think that was actually really well put. So I personally spent about 10 years in China since about 2005. And capital flows is one thing. And this has, politics have a lot of influence on that. Trump is cutting, Trump's policies have basically decreased capital flows from China to US by, 3/4, I think, in the past year. The EU is also trying to enact new policies to restrict Chinese capital going into EU companies or acquiring EU companies. But overall, China is an enormous market. When Chinese investors look at technology outside, they don't really care that much about your revenue. They care about your technology and the applications. And what's really impressive from the inside is the speed and the scale at which things are deployed. So the use of things like facial recognition. So in the foreign media, you mostly hear about surveillance state and stuff. But there's recently I read some news about I don't remember which airport that was, but basically you go in the airport and you have little cameras that are connected to the display screens. So when you stop in front of the screen, the camera recognizes you as a passenger and displays what flight, which gate you should be going to. So it creates a lot of convenience. And there was another anecdote, it's more like probably along the surveillance state style, is if guy I know actually kind of jaywalked crossing in Shenzhen. And by the time he got to the other side, few seconds later, he got notified that he had just been invoiced a fine on his phone. So what it means that it works, and it's being deployed at scale. And you have retail, you have those unmanned stores. There's no that basically can also using mobile payment, facial recognition, check what you're buying, what you're paying, and automate everything. So I think there's a lot. The capital is one aspect, but the local innovation is another aspect, and the fact that some Chinese companies are also trying to become global companies. And we have a few in our portfolio. It's Chinese companies, about 20% of our portfolio at the moment. And we have some doing extremely well going abroad in education, for instance. We have one called MakeBlock doing education robots. And they sell more outside China than inside China. When you look at the products, it's actually really difficult to tell that that's a Chinese company. So, and there's other famous companies like DJI that they are the leaders in consumer imagery drones, and they're excellent. So I think the idea that innovation happens everywhere is being gradually, communicated through examples like this, because there's so much focus on Silicon Valley. People tend to think everything's invented there and everything from outside is just weird or not useful, but that's not the case. So it's worth paying attention.
We've got a couple of really nice ones, so I'm going to go to the Slido next. But I think just to kind of wrap up the point in China, the thing I always say, particularly when you're thinking about deep tech, is not to necessarily think about the product, but rather the system behind it. And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, particularly in Britain, we're having all these big discussions about Huawei and whatnot at the moment coming in, and it's like, well, all of the buses in London, all of the trains in the UK, if you actually look, they're all made by Chinese companies, and we don't seem to care about that. So I think there's an interesting thing there where we kind of start to look at the systems as opposed to the brands. But let's go for this top question. It's got 3 upvotes. Given longer development plus commercialization timelines here, plus relative capital intensity, how do you think about investment and returns at the seed and early stage? Kind of the golden question when it comes to deep tech. Christophe, do you want to kick off?
I think that's a good question. Just to give maybe a couple of orders of magnitude. So type of investments we're making at seed level or even pre-seed sometimes is a couple $100K. 150, 400, 500K for rounds that are more or less on the $1.5 million round for the technologies we're looking at. And then it can be really capital intensive. When you build a quantum computer, it could be 20 million you need for a Series A, 15, 20 million, something like that. So it gets quickly pretty difficult or harder to find the money. And the point for early stage fund is just to figure out how not to get diluted too quickly and to work properly with the capital we have. So we do the follow-ons, but clearly the horizons, we're talking more about 10, 12 years, something like that for the technology we're looking at. It might not be the case for all technologies. That's why we're looking at investments with shorter term applications, anything related to machine learning, for example, but for some applications, mostly the ones related really to the so-called second quantum revolution, there it has to be longer term. And you cannot bet on a strategic exit also. Might happen at some times, that's what people are expecting. Cannot really bet on that, and we'll see how it goes, but by force, I would say it's relatively long term. As I said earlier, at seed stage level, there's an idea of a product, clearly not the same thing that you would have in other sectors. So you take quite some risk at the beginning. It's really a vision. You want to change the world. It's relatively long term. It will happen, might happen. But at the stage where we are with seed level investment and the founders that we have, which are relatively usually not very skilled in business development, there's a lot to do in order to build a proper company together in order to make it sustainable.
I suppose it also depends how you define seed when it comes to deep tech. So I always think seed and deep tech is a different thing than seed and digital. And
absolutely.
Right.
Thanks for absolutely. So the company in seed and deep tech is not seed. The company's been forever there. Like most of the time, again, it's a spin out or it's like a methodology, an algorithm has been developed by a professor for 15 years. By grants, Europe is fantastic for that. Programs like Horizon 2020 with 3 French people here, and France gives a lot of money for deep tech companies. So you buy part of an asset that's worth already 5 to 10 million.
yeah.
I think this is great. I was not doing this when I was backing digital companies. It was like zero. So I'm a big advocate to demystifying this idea because I used to be at Index Ventures, and when you look at the portfolio and the time it takes for a digital company to exit, it is 10 years. It is 8, 9, 10, 12 years. It is absolutely not the 2-3 years thing. You don't want that as an investor because your return is very small. So and biotech today exit faster than digital. So I think there's a lot of myth around it. And again, I go back to this idea of what are you trying to do? We only buy companies that are solving a pain point. There's a problem now. It was a problem yesterday, as a matter of fact, and we found a problem to it now. So the appetite of M&A for these companies is stronger. Because again, we are not buying the revenue of the years necessarily. Sometimes it is if you target consumer tech companies, but you're buying a solution, which is in my view sort of the purpose of venture capital. The DNA of our industry is that you back at the risk and you kind of back pioneering companies that push the boundaries of innovation to do that. So I really don't think it takes longer. In our view, we have sometimes, they might be capital intensive, for sure. When you take Insect, I led the Series B putting 5 million in a 14 million round. The next one was a Series C of 130 million. Of course I got diluted. But then you're in a space where there's so few competition because the barrier to entry is so hard. Then actually you're happy to be there because you won amongst the top 3 global leader. When you do this in a more classic space, you have hundreds of competitors. You don't even know what they are. So I feel like it's a less risky investment in my perspective than something else. And then again, there's other companies like you put rightly so, Christophe, that are software. They're going to be based on a very complex kind of computational model, but ultimately it's a software, and that we know how to do that. It's a SaaS basically, just more complex because it's tackling more complex problems. So again, I really don't think it's that true.
Yeah, no, someone said, I can't remember who it was, I think it was on another panel at another conference, but an investor said about when they were talking about risk, and they were saying if you take a non-deep tech company, if there is such a word for that, you're sort of investing in the fact that they've done a lot of marketing to get users. But if you invest in a deep tech company, you're literally buying IP that has value, and you could argue that is far more, less risky and more, eventually you can sell that for something, if you see what I mean.
It's an execution play in digital most of the time. It's a product play, it's a business model play, and it's an execution play. and a market in fundraising play. In deep tech, it would be at first an innovation play.
Yeah.
Is your solution better? And then you have a use case. So it's a very different mindset.
We've only got 2 minutes left, and I see this one in the middle has 4 votes. I wouldn't normally put platform development like blockchain into deep tech, but maybe I'm wrong there. If you guys get any thoughts on this, where would you advise to seek funding for platform development like a blockchain-based internet solution? With 4 votes, so I'm going to ask you very quickly if you have any thoughts on that. Yeah, no, that was my. I'm really sorry. Whoever asked the question, I don't have unless you have any immediate thoughts.
I mean,
Sophia.
we don't do much blockchain, but I can recommend Blue Yard in Germany. They're fairly bullish on that space, whoever asked that question.
There's also State Zero in the UK. They're more of an accelerator, but I know that they focus more on blockchain. We've got a minute left. Let's do that middle question, because I think this is kind of a nice one, particularly when you have stories in the media that sometimes plague deep tech, particularly around Theranos. How do you validate claims made by potential investment opportunities?
Yeah, in our case, we want to see a prototype that actually demonstrates some of the key claims. So that helps. Now also, after 6 years investing, about 250 deals in hardware with a lot of deep tech, we have in-house expertise and also a lot of founders in our community on in our network that can help.
It's really about the network and the people we can gather to make the due diligence and to discuss about these technologies. Most of the time, a lot of the science has been published for technologies we're looking at, so we can build some expertise. I wouldn't say easily. You need to find the people to be able to read it and to build the case, but I would say it's available. And there's clearly a way to assess the technology. It takes time. It's difficult, but I think it's rather straightforward.
Sophia, do you have any further thoughts on this validation
Yeah,
question?
it's the same. Actually, it's this question we really ask ourselves a lot. Because none of us is technical. I studied mathematics, but then I stopped and became a business person. So it's do we need someone? And the reality is that every company is a very specific thing. So we did lab-grown company. It's very specific. And then a software like building a model on Bayesian statistics. So each of them, none of us can. At best, we understand what they do. But we can't pretend to kind of be able to do the DD. So for each investment, we go and try to find the few experts in the space, and we run technical DD on every one of our investment. And that's, again, something indeed that is particular to deep tech investor, which you don't do if you do just digital.
I'm going to be naughty and put one final question in, and it's a one-word answer, and it'll become clear unless it's 2 or 3 words. I want you to give me one company that you haven't invested in, it's not in your portfolio, who's deep tech, who you're most excited about right now. Sophia, you're going first.
Just one.
But you can, okay, if you can give 2, but you've got to be quick because we're over time.
No, I'll respect the time. So a company called AM Silk out of Germany who is basically producing biopolymer. And they started with producing the shoes of Adidas. It's basically kind of sustainable silk, but very in a different way. And now they're moving to building materials for aircrafts, like Airbus, etc. Love it because it's a company completely under the radar. Phenomenal team, phenomenal product, and it's already of the TPG of this world and the blind spot of VC. So I think it's a good example of what we're missing in our own ecosystem, and then they have to go somewhere else to do that.
Thank you, Sophia. Christophe.
I invest in all the companies I like.
Okay, well, you got to give me one you kind of like.
Not so sure I can. No, it would be mostly at this stage. I think probably because they are a little bit too late stage for us. So there's a couple of companies in quantum computing at the moment that are interesting. Cannot really talk about, but they didn't close their rounds. But yeah, definitely for very large rounds we were not in, but super exciting.
Amazing.
I'll give a more broad answer. Is that there's a number of companies that came out of a lab called Willow Garage that's based in Silicon Valley that was doing a lot of very advanced robotics development. And that spun out a number of companies. We invested in one of them, but I wish we had also had the opportunity to invest in some of the others.
What was the name of the lab? I didn't quite hear you.
Willow Garage.
Oh, Willow Garage. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Some of the spin-out companies.
Amazing, awesome. I know we've ran over time, so I'm getting the evils from Pioneers. Sorry about that. But yeah, just one final thing to say is I think that whenever people ask me about deep tech, I think I always kind of finish on saying, for me, it's probably the more exciting area of investment and of tech at the moment because it is that solution-based approach, and it really is tackling things that are sort of systemic underneath the world. And I really think that more people should take more of an investment and more of an interest in this space. Thank you guys so much for listening.